Wait, 80%.
What the hell is even that?
The Pincer maneuver event is here once again, with more rewards like the forgery supply for players to claim, which is insanely beneficial for players like me who built multiple characters at the same time. But there are some huge problems with this event, and I think Kuro should make some changes to it in the future. If you're new here on the channel, welcome to another event breakdown where I play current event for the longest possible time to offer you ways that you can use to maximize your rewards. If this video proves helpful in any way, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to help support the channel. First of all, let's try to understand how the event actually works. There are 5 stages and each have a unique name that is similar to the echoes that we have in the game. Each stage is filled with 1-cost echoes, exiles, and Fragzitis enemies, so you're not going to be fighting enemies like Dreamless on the Calamity class stage because of how it's named. From the Common class to Calamity class stages, you'll have 5 waves of enemies to eliminate. You gain points for clearing all the waves of enemies and additional points for clearing them within the shortest possible time. On every stage, you have a general buff that's granted to your teammate. For example, in the Common class and Elite class, when a character on your team hits an enemy, it grants you Thunder Mark stacks every 3 seconds. Reaching 30 stacks will summon lightning to strike your enemies that does big damage. But what the game does not tell you is that the lightning scales off the stats of the character that triggered it, like crit, attack, electro damage bonus, etc. When I used my fully built Zhangli Yao, you can see that the lightning damage was 101k without any buffs from Shorekeeper, but after the rejuvenating glow and outro buff from Shorekeeper, the lightning damage got increased to 121k damage. When I used my fully built character like Camellia, the lightning damage was around 47k because her build is focused on doing havoc damage. This directly influences your team building because if you want to have the best clear time and the highest points possible, you need to have a fully maxed out electro DPS like Zhang Liao. Kukaracha also works, but he doesn't have a large AoE damage potential, so the only one that I recommend is Zhang Liao since he was given for free a while back during the Moonlit Festival event. If you go down below, you will see Team 1 buff and Team 2 buff. As the name suggests, these buffs directly apply to the teams you choose in your first slot, which is Team 1, and the second slot, which is Team 2. The Team 1 buff pairs well with the lightning damage because you gain 2 extra Thunder Mark stacks when you hit the enemy with electro damage that crits, which won't be a problem if your main electro DPS is fully built, and this Team 1 buff stays the same for all the event stages. So as a general rule, always use your electro DPS character in the first slot. Team 2 buff is where the problem lies. What it basically wants you to do is to use a character that can trigger coordinated attacks on the field to be able to gain extra Thunder Mark stacks. When that character deals coordinated attacks, that crits, and this buff stays the same for all the event stages as well. We've already established that characters built to do electro damage will deal the highest lightning damage, so what this basically means is that it wants you to play Yanlin on the field. Jeji can also work, but the lightning damage will be significantly low if she's built to do glacial damage. The issue here is that characters like Yanlin and Jeji don't really do that much damage compared to main DPS characters like Calculator Pro Max and Jian at S0. So playing Yanlin on the field to trigger lightning more frequently is viable in the Common to Calamity stages that requires you to get just 2,700 points, but it won't give you the highest point in the Endless Arena stage because of her low damage output and small area of effects damage. So my advice is to completely ignore the Team 2 buffs and use your strongest DPS characters that can do damage in a large area of effect like Jian. That brings us to the general buff that you can choose. The Saint mode is not really great because it just buffs coordinated attack damage. The Feline Infinite Booster is okay, but only use that if you're not using an electro main DPS in the first slot, which is not recommended anyway. So you have to choose the Real Lightning, which gives you 80% lightning damage and gives your entire team 20% crit rate. Now, this is where another problem lies. It would have been great to be able to select one of these buffs for each of these teams. My Jian team in the second slot can use the Feline Infinite Booster buff since that team will not benefit that much from the lightning damage because of his arrow build and he doesn't do coordinated attacks. It kinda sucks to have one buff that you can choose that applies to all the 2 teams. The Overlord and Calamity class have slightly different general buff. It says that you now gain Thunder Mark stacks when your characters hit the enemies with coordinated attacks, and that character doesn't have to be on the field to be able to gain those stacks. So for the Overlord and Calamity class stages, I suggest that you pair Zhang Li Yao with Yuan Wu. All you have to do is just pop Yuan Wu's skill and go Unga Bunga on the enemies with Zhang Li Yao. Using a Jiyan team with Verena also works well in the Overlord and Calamity stages because Mortefi and Verena also provide coordinated attacks that can help build Thundermark stacks much faster. Jinshi and Jeji teams are a bit weird after testing because you have to rotate your team after every Dragon Blast Forte skill, which is mostly too much damage for one wave of enemies, while Jiyan can clear multiple waves before his liberation ends. But try it out anyway and let me know how it goes. Just don't worry too much about the Team 2 buff as long as you gain some benefit from the general buff, like gaining Thundermark stacks from coordinated attacks triggered by any character on your team. That brings us to the Endless Arena. In this stage, the wave of enemies is infinite, so you have 2 minutes per team to clear most of them. The general buffs you gain are a combination of the previous stages. You gain Thundermark stacks when you hit the enemy, and when you hit enemies with coordinated attacks by any teammate. The Team 1 and Team 2 buffs stays the same. The recommended teams here are no different from the Calamity and Overlord stages. Just use Zhang Li Yao and Yuan Wu team in the first slot and your Jiyan team in the second slot. If you don't have Jiyan, just use the most powerful team that you have available in the second slot and ignore the Team 2 buffs. What you need to do is to get the highest amount of points that you can with the first team because both points will add up to each other and you need 6,000 points to be able to get all the rewards. Now, what Kuro can do to make this event a little bit better is to change the Team 2 buffs to something more general that every team can use. Like for example, using resonance skills by your teammates can regenerate some Thundermark stacks, which works fine because you will rotate your team anyway to do damage, and new players can benefit from this since they might not have access to coordinated attack teams like Jinshi and Jiyan. Another way to make it better is to have the freedom to choose one of these buffs for specific teams like I mentioned earlier, if they still want to maintain this oddly specific buff to make it easier to clear this event and get your rewards, because aside from the unique experience that you gain from event, what most players like myself care about is the rewards that we get, so I hope Kuro can make it better in the future. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching and consider liking the video and subscribing to help support the channel. We're trying to reach 6K subscribers before the year ends, so it will help me out tremendously if you liked and subscribe. Catch you guys in the next one. Bye bye.